Hello everyone. I've put together a new add-on for Blender that will automatically lip-sync your characters to spoken audio tracks. It can be used for both 2D and 3D characters and in multiple languages, and can really speed up your workflow if you have a lot of characters that need lip-syncing. It uses OpenAI's Whisper technology to convert your spoken audio into syllables, so it requires an internet connection to work, but once it's set up, it's fairly straightforward to use. Installation can be a little tricky since it requires you to install some software packages in addition to the Parrot Lipsync add-on. If you're having trouble with setup, you can find more detailed instructions on the Parrot Lipsync GitHub webpage. First, you need to have Ffmpeg installed on your system. Ffmpeg is a popular open-source media library that Whisper uses to read data from various audio file formats. You can get it from the ffmpeg.org website. Unfortunately, there is no official installer for it, but setting it up manually isn't too tricky. For Windows systems, you just need to unzip the zip file containing the ffmpeg binary and then add the path of it to your system path. Once ffmpeg is installed, you will need to modify the Python distribution that Blender ships with. To do this, open a terminal window in the directory where your Blender's Python is located. Now you can install Whisper timestamped and Groot by issuing the following commands. Once these dependencies have been installed, you can install the Parrot Lipsync Blender add-on in the same way that you install any other Blender add-on. Open the Preferences menu, go to the Add-ons tab, click the Install button, and select the Parrot Lipsync zip file. Make sure to check the box next to Parrot Lipsync to enable it after the installation finishes. Once you have Parrot installed, you can start using it. I have a basic character here that I've rigged using Rigify, although you can use whichever rigging system you want. And I've also gone ahead and made a bunch of poses for it. You can see all the mouth pose positions I've created for the different phonemes that we're going to be using. And I've created another video on this. I'm going to post the link here, and you can go there and watch that video if you need any help in understanding how to set up this sort of library. But let's assume that you've already done that. And if we look down here in our action editor, we can see we have actions for each and every one of these mouth poses. All right, now let's open up Blender. If we press the N key in the viewport, it will be at the on the tab that says Parrot Lipsync, and you can see it's already open. And here are all your options. The top option is the Whisper library. Whisper has several different libraries from tiny up to large that contain different numbers of words. The only difference here is how accurate it's going to be versus how much memory it's going to take up and how much time it's going to take for processing. Base is the default, so we're just going to go with that, but you can choose whichever one you think is going to work. The phoneme table, we're going to skip this for now. This is basically just a JSON file in which you can define which particular phoneme groups you're going to be using for your animation. This is the one that Parrot comes with by default, but if you want to customize it, you can do that as well, and I'm going to cover that in a later section of the video. Next, we have the key interpolation. For 3D, you're probably going to want this at either default or Bezier. If it's at default, that just means it is going to use whatever interpolation is currently on your action. And if you set it to Bezier, then it's going to use Bezier interpolation between different phonemes. For 3D, this is what you want. Constant is probably what you want if you're doing 2D, but we'll cover that later. Let's leave this on default for now. And auto detect language. The way this is processed, the language that is being used is important. the script is set up right now to do its best to auto-detect the language, and it's pretty good at doing that. But if you want to explicitly define a language, you can uncheck that and put your language code in this box, and then it will use that language. Let's leave that on auto-detect for now. And now we have two sections. We have this up here, which renders the audio to a single action. And we have this other section down here that is for creating NLA strips, which we'll get to in a little bit later on. And finally, the last thing we need to worry about is the phoneme table. Now, if we open this tab here, you can see the phoneme groups, and these are all the different groups that are defined by the phoneme table that we set up here. And you can see by default, these are all empty. And what we need to do is go through and match each one of our lip sync poses to the entry in the phoneme table here. So for the A group, we're just going to scroll down to our A lip pose. For the C group, we're going to pick the C, and the E. Now, I just chose names for each one of these actions so that they match up. I'd recommend doing that for your mouth poses too, just to make it a little bit easier on you. But of course, you can name your actions whatever you want. And there's only about 13 of them. So, and you only need to set this up once for every time you use this pose. If you change to a different character that has different mouth positions or different mouth actions, you're going to need to go through and set this up all over again. But if you're rendering to the same character several times over, you can just keep these actions and reuse them. And finally, the last one, the rest action. This is a special pose which represents the mouth being shut. And you can see we have that pose right here. So we'll just go through and add that in as a regular action, just like everything else. Okay, we're now done. And now we are going to bake this to a lip sync. And we're going to do that by, now we can specify the action we want to bake to by putting it in here, or if we leave this blank, Parrot is going to generate one for us. Let's leave it blank for now, and I'm going to open up the system console so you can see what's going on once we press the generate button, because Parrot is going to print some information to the console which you might find useful. All right, so let's render the lip sync to the action. Oh, I forgot one thing. You have to select the audio you want to bake to. If we come over here to the video editing tab, you can place any number of sound files in here that your character is going to synchronize to. And when you use the render to lip sync action, it is going to look for whichever one of these has a white highlight on it, and then use that as the source for creating the action. So once again, let's press that button. And we should see some action here shortly. So because Parrot is using Whisper as sort of the back end for translating everything, it does need to update the library. We're using the base library right now, which is the second smallest one, so it shouldn't be too large. All right, and you can see it's already started. Now it is sending that data to Whisper to translate. And I think that this works on the local machine. And now you can see the translation of the text. So you can double check that if you want to verify that the correct text came through. And now you can see the breakdown of phonemes. And at this point, it is done analyzing the text, and it's just baking the action. And it looks like it's done. And you can see the name of our new action has been filled in here as Lipsync. That is the default name. And if we look in the action editor, we can see the Lipsync action has been added to our list of actions. And if we click on that to make that the active action, we can play that and see the speech.
I'll Tell You How the Sun Rose by Emily Dickinson. Read for LibriVox.org by Winston Tharp. I'll tell you how the sun rose, a ribbon at a time. The steeples swam in amethyst, the news like squirrels ran.
Okay, and so on like that. Now you might notice all these vertical lines here. This is because in addition to writing out all the keys, we also are writing the markers here. So if you go to select markers, if you turn that on, you can see the pose markers. So by default, this will be off. You can turn these on though, and this will actually show you which groups are being used for which actions. And to actually see the actions, let's click on our rig here. Going to press tab, and let's go into pose mode. And if we press A to select everything, now all those keys are going to be showing up. And that is the basics of how you lip sync a single audio track to a single action and then apply it to your model. Instead of recording directly to an action, you can record to an NLA strip instead. An NLA strip is basically an action, but which has some extra data added to it. The NLA editor here allows you to arrange several NLA strips and combine them with each other so that they all work together. For example, you can see I have this simple animation set up here where I have most of the animation down here on the seated at tree strip, but the eyebrows are on a separate strip, so I can move them independently. We're going to use Parrot to create a third strip that has the lip sync data on it, and it's going to add it into this graph in just the right place so that it's perfectly synced with the audio. So one thing we have to do differently from the last time, now you can see we have the phonemes all set up here just like we did with the recording to action, and these parameters are all the same here. What we're going to do differently though is select our target object in this field here. So let's select the eyedropper tool and select the rig, because it is the rig that is going to be animated. And then finally we can come down here and select the strip that we want to record with. And because we're going to be doing the NLA strip, we're not limited to just one. We can select as many of these strips as you want, and it will create actions or create strips for every single one of them. However, we only have the one at the moment, so we'll just select this one and select Render Lip Sync to Object NLA and wait for that to finish. When it's all done, your NLA strip will be added into the editor right here, and you can see the mouth now moves back and forth in sync with the audio.
So the apple tree. Then I pass on the grass from one leaf to another, from one leaf to its brother.
Setting up a character for 2D lip syncing is a little bit different than setting it up for 3D. So I'm just going to run through this and see how this all comes together. First of all, let's just look at how the character itself is built. You can see we have the several layers here. Let me just turn those off so I can show you how they all come together. So at the very back we have the fills for the background, and then there's the lines for it. And this character is set up so that the lines are separate from the fills, which can be easier for editing. And then the next layer up is the fills for the mouth, and then the lines for the mouth, and then the fills for the front and the lines for the front. And if we turn off the front and the back ones, we can see just the part that's the mouth, the fills and the lines. And if we scrub through the timeline, you can see how I've set keyframes for the different mouth poses. And each one of these mouth poses corresponds to one of the entries in the chart here. And if we turn the front and the back on again, you can see how we sort of animate the character's mouth as we scrub through the timeline here. Now, what we want to do is change this character so that rather than playing this as a straight animation, we can pick the particular mouth pose that we want to express. So in order to do that, we can come over here and add a modifier to it. So make sure the character is selected and then click on the wrench here to open the modifiers tab. And we will add in a time offset modifier. And what this does is allow you to override the timeline with whichever time you want. And if we set the mode to fixed frame, then whatever frame we put in the frame category here is going to be the frame we jump to on the timeline. Now, the thing is, we don't want to jump all the frames to that particular frame. We only want to focus on the mouth. So we're going to come down to influence and set this to mouth lines. And let's close that up again. And now when we scrub through, you can see that's changing the lines of the mouth. But we don't want to change just the lines of the mouth. We want to change the fills too. Well, we can do that by adding a second modifier. So let's add a time offset. This is going to also be fixed frame. And the influence, we're going to set that to mouth fills. And now when we scrub to the timeline, if these match up, you can see that we've gone to the right mouth position. Now that we have our modifiers set up, we are going to create actions for each one of our mouth poses because Parrot uses actions as the source material for each one of the mouth positions. We're going to do this by coming down here to the action editor. This is part of the dope sheet. So make sure that's selected if it isn't otherwise selected, and make sure this drop down is set to action editor. And let's press rewind to go back to the first frame. And we're going to create a new action by clicking on the new button. And we're going to start off with the mouth in the rest pose. So let's type in mouth rest. And now we're going to keyframe this. Because the rest position is at frame 1, we're going to set this to 1. And same for down here. And now we're going to press this little circle next to it to keyframe it. And now we've just created our keyframe pose for the mouth rest position. One more thing we're going to do, we're going to click this little shield, which is going to tell Blender to store this action in memory, even if there's nothing else explicitly linking to it. And if we click on this little drop down here, you can see our pose is now remembered, and there's a little F next to it, which means that Blender is holding on to it. And we're going to press the X button, and this doesn't delete the action. You can see it's still listed there. This just clears it out of the work area, so we can move on to our next pose. So we're going to use this chart here. The next pose up is the AEI pose. So let's click New. Let's type in mouth AEI. And we're going to do something very similar. We're going to move that up to position 2. And we're going to keyframe both of those. And we're going to press the shield so that Blender remembers it. And then press X because we're now done with that pose. The next one up is L, so let's click New, type in mouth L for that pose. Going to increment the frame. We're going to keyframe both of those and click the shield again so that Blender remembers it, and X to clear. And we're just going to do this over and over again for each one of these poses until we've got them all. So I'm going to speed this up now, but if you're following along, you can just watch me create new poses for each and every one of these mouth positions. Now that all our actions are created, we can set up Parrot to use them to prepare for the lip sync. If we click this little drop down here, we can see all of the actions that we created are present. So let's scroll down here to the Parrot tab, and we're going to go with all the defaults up here. And the phoneme groups, you can see it's empty right now. We're just going to click on Reload Phoneme Table, because sometimes when you first start Blender, the phoneme table isn't going to be loaded properly. And we're going to go through each one of these entries one by one and hook them up to those actions we just created. So in this first slot for the A group, we're going to set this to the mouth AEI pose. And the C group, we're going to set that to the C pose, the double E group, the double E, and so on. This won't take too long in this particular setup. We only have 13 of these guys. And finally, the rest position for the mouth being closed. Now that we have Parrot set up, let's add in the audio track we want to sync to. We're going to click the plus button, come down here to video editing to create a new video editing tab. We're going to navigate to the directory with our audio file in it and drag that down into the audio area. And we can click on display waveform in order to get a visual indication of what the sound looks like. And if we play back,
many acquainted curious volume,
we can hear it. We're going to change playback to sync to audio. By default, this is going to be play every frame, but if you do sync to audio, it's going to drop frames so that you get a better indication of what the playback sounds like. We've also turned on scrubbing, so that if you move the timeline back and forth, you can get an indication of what the sound sounds like at each and every frame you jump to. All right, let's go back to 2D animation. And we're going to change this from the dope sheet to the video sequencer so that we can see that audio track right there. Let's actually get a bit more of a zoomed in view there. All right. Now, make sure this is selected so that when we run the NLA analyzer, it is going to know what audio strip to draw from. And we're going to scroll back up to the top. We're going to change the key interpolation from default to constant, because when we jump between syllables, we want to jump precisely to the next syllable. We don't want to run up, which is going to cause a lot of in-between frames that we don't want. And finally, we're going to set the target object. Because this action is going to be on our character here, we're going to click the eyedropper tool, select our character, and that is now loaded into the target object. So finally, we're all set up. We're going to click Render Lip Sync to Object NLA, and when this is finished, our new NLA strip is going to appear right here in the NLA editor. And there we go. Now when we play back, we should see our character's lips lip-synced to the data.
Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many acquainted curious volume of forgotten lore.
And that's how you do it in 2D. Now, the NLA Baker doesn't have to work with one strip at a time, but it can work with multiple strips at once, and it can even use strips with different languages. Let's give that a shot. Let's come up here to video editing, and I'm going to drag 2 more strips into the timeline. This one and this one. So this is the same poem, but it's going to be in Spanish instead of French. Spanish instead of English, and also French instead of English. Let's set the end frame down there. Let's turn on the waveforms for both of these just so we can see them a little bit better. Okay, and let's select the both of them. Go back to the 2D animation window, and you can see they're now both appearing in that window down there. And let's get a bit of a better view of our NLA editor. Shrink that down a little bit. And now, when we render the lip sync to object NLA, we should get these selected strips as well. Okay, and there the strips are in the timeline. And if we play back, we can see this play back in other languages as well.
Comme je remuais la tête, presque sommeillant, soudain l'on frappa à la porte, un coup retentissant.
Estaba soñoliento la cabeza. De repente a mi puerta oí llamar, como si alguien suavemente se pusiese con incierta mano tímida a tocar.
Parrot uses a separate file called a phoneme table that it uses to determine what the groups are that you're going to be using in the lip sync. By default, you have these groups here, or at least these are the ones that ship with Blender. But if you want different groups, if you want to add some, remove some, or change some, you can do that by making a copy of this file and then just adding, removing, or altering the different entries in it. There's 3 sections. The first section is info. This isn't used by the add-on for anything. This is just additional information that you might find helpful for a human who comes through and decides to edit this. The first important one is the groups here, which has an entry for each and every group that you're going to associate an action for. So you can see we have the A group here, the L group, the W group. You can name these groups whatever you want. I'm using these names here to give an indication of what they're going to be used for, the sort of actions you want associated with them. And there's also a little bit of descriptive text here to give a hint to the user as to the sorts of sounds that you would expect to put in this group. So in the C group, we're expecting C sounds, D sounds, G's, K's, R's, S's, and so on. And this is just some extra text that is displayed alongside the name in Parrot itself to just give a hint to the user. So you can set this to whatever you feel would be useful. The other section that's important is the phonemes part. And this is what maps the actual phonemes of a word to the group. So for example, you can see the code up here maps a P syllable to the M group, because the M group up here is meant to handle B, M, and P sounds. Well, the P is mapping to the M group here. And you can see in the next entry, the B syllable is mapping to the M group as well. Now, while these look like ordinary characters, you might see that there are some funny ones here. For example, we have a theta here, and we have, I think that's a sigma. It's a little hard to tell. And we have this funny S shape here. Now, these aren't strictly the regular characters you would use on the keyboard. These are what are called International Phonetic Alphabet characters. And this is what is output by the GROOT program, which is what Parrot is using to figure out what the different syllables of a word are. So you might need to consult the International Phonetic Alphabet to get the list of what all these different syllables are. But the whole point here is the code is the syllable that comes out of the GROOT program, and the group is the group that you have defined up here that syllable is being put into. And these extra 2 lines are just for information. They're not being used by Parrot at the moment. They might be used in a future version of it, but basically the class is the type of syllable it is. So you can see these first ones are all stops. Then we have the F and the V, which are frictives. And a little bit further down, you can see we have affricates. I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce that. And the nasals for the M's and the N's. and so on. And then the example just provides some usage examples of how these are used. So for example, the I code is the sort of sound you would get in the word see or neat or piece. And this other I is for pin, bit, lick, short eyes, and so on like that. So yeah, like I say, the class and the example aren't actually used by Parrot itself. They're more here for humans to better understand what these entries mean. The important ones are the code. This has to be an API symbol, an IAP symbol, and the group is the group that phoneme is being put into. So if you want to design your own table, I'd recommend starting with this one and then just adding or deleting entries until you get it into the form that you wish. And that's the Parrot Lipsync add-on. I hope you find it useful. Before I leave you with some lip sync animations, please remember to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support my work, please consider making a one-time donation to Ko-fi or subscribing to me on my Patreon. I'll also be posting this to my Gumroad page, so that will be another place where you can find it. So, happy animating everyone, and thanks for watching.
When the sun shines through the leaves of the apple tree, when the sun makes shadows of the leaves of the apple tree, then I pass on the grass from one leaf to another, from one leaf to its brother. Tiptoe, tiptoe, here I go.
I'll Tell You How the Sun Rose by Emily Dickinson. Read for LibriVox.org by Winston Tharp. I'll tell you how the sun rose, a ribbon at a time. The steeples swam in amethyst, the news like squirrels ran. The hills untied their bonnets, the bobolinks begun. Then I said softly to myself, that must have been the sun. But how he set I know not. There seemed a purple stile, which little yellow boys and girls were climbing all the while, till when they reached the other side, a dominie in grey put gently up the evening bars and led the flock away. End of poem. This recording is in the public domain.
Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door, only this and nothing more.
Jadis, vers l'heure sombre de minuit, triste et lassé, quand, faible et mélancolique, je pensais au passé, en lisant une page étrange, curieuse et obscure, de connaissances oubliées, de peines bien dures. Comme je remuais la tête, presque sommeillant, soudain l'on frappa à la porte, un coup retentissant. Comme si l'on frappait par plaisir, même en plaisantant. On frappa à la porte de ma chambre avec ardeur. Alors je murmurai à part, c'est quelque visiteur qui frappe à la porte de ma chambre à coups soutenus. Seulement cela et rien de plus.
Una fosca medianoche, cuando en tristes reflexiones sobre más de un raro infolio de olvidados cronicones, inclinaba soñoliento la cabeza, de repente a mi puerta oí llamar, como si alguien suavemente se pusiese con incierta mano tímida a tocar. Es, me dije, una visita que llamando está a mi puerta. Eso es todo, y nada más.